Welcome back. We're going to continue on this series and we're going to take a look at components, which, along with variables, are what really drew me to fall in love with Figma. So, for designers who are not familiar with the component concept, I would think one way to think of them would be kind of like styles, where you can, predefine some properties and reuse it across your file. But instead, component is a visual item that you can reuse across your file here. For developers, a component is pretty much what you'd be used to if you were programming a component. Same kind of concept. You're going to have some sort of visual piece, most likely, but in this case, definitely, with properties and even variants of the component in the case of Figma. As I had noted in the previous video, I am self-taught with Figma and most things. So the way I'm going to describe this may not be the complete right way, but in my mind, in Figma, at least so far with the experience I've had using it, I classify two types of components. A component that truly represents a component that will be converted into code in an application, or a utility component, which might be a component you make to help you aid in your design file, but not necessarily one that translates over to development. So think of it more like a tool for you. We'll take some of the elements we have here and make a component out of them first to give kind of a generic look at components, but then we'll finish up the video by making something actually usable and real. So if we click on, let's just pick this first element here, or this frame here with the row of boxes. To create a component, you can, I believe the shortcut is Option Command K, or with the item selected, you can click this button here, Create Component, and you'll notice some changes to the panel over here on the right. But also you'll notice that the icon for this has changed and it's purple. So purple is the way you'd identify either a component or an instance of a component. And they're both going to be purple. They're going to have a slightly different icon. The instance, I believe, is just a diamond, one diamond. So in this series, how they refer to them in Figma itself, right now, this is what's considered the master component. Anytime we use this component in the design, that is considered an instance. Before we do anything else, let's go ahead and we'll give this component a name. So over on the left here, if you double click in there, we'll call this row of boxes. And the reason I wanted to give it a name was I wanted to show how you access this component to be used. So let's go ahead, let's move over here, and we're going to create another artboard frame. So click the F key or the button down here. And let's see, let's just drag another box. Doesn't, just at least the same size as that. I'm going to zoom out here. Okay. So if we go over to Assets on the left, you'll now see this option here. Go ahead and click on that. And here is our component. So we have a couple different ways we can add this to our project. You can click on it, and it's going to bring up this dialog. And you click Insert Instance, and I believe it's going to insert it into whatever you have selected. So it would go inside that frame. Further down the line, when we start adding properties, you would see the properties here. So you can kind of pre-define the properties you want before you hit insert. So there's that option. Many times I just take it and drag it. So here we go. Right off the bat, not anything crazy and fancy. It basically just looks like a copy of this, which it is. But this instance will take on any changes that happen in the master. So if we were to go over to the master, and let's just pick this second box here, which is set to fill, but let's go ahead and give it a fixed width by clicking and dragging, just making it a little bit bigger. You'll see that that's being represented over here on the right. So that is the most basic of important pieces of information for how a component works. You have a master copy, and the changes to that master copy will trickle down to any instance that you have. Now, if I select this and I hit the Command D to duplicate, we'll get another instance, and these are independent of each other. However, they still are bound to this master. Just for giggles, let's click on the frame here. Let's rename it. I'm probably going to start deviating from the artboard naming convention now. I think you guys, those of you who are Adobe people, probably get the gist now. Okay, so also with the component preview frame selected, let's turn on auto layout. And there we go. We'll go ahead and make it still a little bit taller. All right, so again, if I change anything in here, it will be reflected on both instances that I have in the project. Now, as I said, the changes trickle down. However, you can, within an instance, you can override any property, I believe any property, so var any property that I've experienced. So like if we came in here and double clicked on that second square, and let's make it a different color. You see how that did not affect the other instance nor the master copy. And if I double click on the master and we make this an even different color, the blue, all right, well, it's kind of purple, you'll see that that only affected the one that we did not do an override on. So you need to just keep that in mind. This is a helpful thing, but can also burn you if you're not familiar with it. If you make some changes in here and then, later on down the line, you want to update your master component, you may find that there's some places where that didn't get updated because you did some customizations in one of the instances. Another thing you can do, though, is you can send the changes back to the master. And this is helpful, but also can be dangerous because you can, basically any changes I made to this, all of them will go to the master, which then affects all of the instances that do not have other overrides on them. In this case, the only thing we have changed is that color. So if I right click on this, and I go to main component, and I say push changes to main component, the result of this should be that all of the components now have that dark red. So there you go. And I do believe, I'll test this theory, but because we did that, and this is the only one that did have an override, it no longer has an override because it is now lined up with master. So I believe if I change this color now to another color, the two instances, yeah, they will follow suit. So they are all in alignment. Hopefully that's not too confusing, but this is why I wanted to use just a really basic element to illustrate some of these, the kind of inheritance concept and overrides and such. While we have this simple component here, let's go ahead and let's actually change this artboard to, we'll call it components. And this will house only components. So we're going to get rid of these other items. Oh, I was not thinking about that. Well, actually, this is a good point. So you'll notice that the height of this changed, but it did not affect our instances. And that is because this is set to fill, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't quite wrapped my head around how the properties of the parent frame of a component do not trickle down, because these are not set to fill height. So we'll just keep that in mind. But let's go ahead. I want to, just for sanity, right click. Let's see if this works. No. I want to make this the same. So 52.75. There we go. Okay, so let's click back on our file tab here. Well, here's, okay, so we can actually see now what I meant. There's a diamond shape for the icon of the instances, but they're all component related layers are purple. Let's look at properties. So this isn't a very complex component. We don't have a lot of items in here, but I'm going to demonstrate. If we click on plus for properties, let's do a Boolean property. And if you don't know what that means, it basically true or false, yes or no, 1 or 0. Let's click on that. And call this show big box. And we'll have it, this is going to be the default value of that property. So if we click create property, you're going to see it show up here on the master component, and you can edit it by hitting these faders here. If we click on an instance, and let's see. Oh, actually, this is a good reminder to myself. We have not applied that property to anything, so it does not show up on the instance yet. So we need to apply it. Let's double click on the big box. And if we go down to appearance, you'll see this icon here. And this is, I can't remember if I brought this up in the last video or not, but this icon represents applying a variable or a property to something. So if we click on this, we can say, I want to use the show big box property to determine whether this is visible or not. And you'll see that now that is bound to that property that we created. Now, if we click on the instance, yeah, that's what I want to see. Now you see this toggle. See that? So now we have a setting that allows us to manipulate this particular instance. And this is so powerful. This is a dumb example of how to use it and how powerful it is, but this is amazing. So another thing we could do, and we haven't done any text yet, let's go ahead. We'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. Let's do some text. You can hit the T key, or you can hit the text button down here, and we're going to click inside the big box. And we're going to just call it big box. Let's click outside of it. You'll see that it is underneath. It is a child of that frame. And actually, let's just go ahead and change that frame name to big box as well. I don't like that. That's bothering me, but they're both that. But I'm going to ignore that. With that selected, let's go ahead and put auto layout on. So Shift A. And there. So it's kind of nicely positioned in there. Now what we can do is we're going to add a text property to the component. Now, the last time we added a property, we clicked on the main parent frame of the component and went and hit this plus button. And we could do that again and hit text. But that did add the extra step of then assigning it to the thing that we want to use that property for. Another option is if we double click a couple times to get into the text. If we come down here, okay, so here is the text that's in here. This changing this property here will actually change the value. So we'll put that back to big box. Okay, so right now it's just whatever we put in here. But if we click this create property or apply, it'll come up and we don't have any. We do have these presets, which again, I'm really irritated by those being here. In my opinion, it's kind of spammy for Figma to do. But if we click plus, now we get a new dialog box to create a property, and we're going to give it big box label. And for default, we'll make it big box create property. So now if we click on our instance, now you see we have another property on our instances. So we can manipulate this. And we'll call this dark box. So this one has a different property value than this one. So also very cool, terrible implementation and preview or example, but there you go. So, and I mentioned I wanted to kill two birds with one stone. I want to show you that because this text is nested inside or a child of the big box frame, if we decide to hide big box, we lose that text as well. So we're hiding that frame and everything it contains. That may have been obvious, but important to point out. So another concept with components and property is the idea of a variant of a component. So right now we have this master and there's just one variant of it. So you could use variants. Maybe we wanted a slightly different look to this cool component. If we have the master component selected and we click this button here, which is add variant, it's going to duplicate the main component. It's going to add this new property here with a value of variant 2 to this one, and this one's going to be variant, default. Instead of default, we'll give it big box left. If we click on this one, actually, I'm going to back up. Click on that again. I don't like that this title or this value has to get cut off. We can take advantage of the actual property name and call it big box position. And then instead of big box left, we'll just say left. Now if we click on the second variant, we'll change this to right. And let's actually follow through with that. So one easy way to do this is to double click on the big box. And because this is an auto layout, at least I think it was. Yes. Double click on that again. You can use brackets to move things around. And I'll be honest, I'm going to forget which combination moves it one step over or all the way. So I'm going to start with command right bracket. Okay, so that's the one that moves it over one spot at a time. So if we do it again, we move over there. Do the other bracket, we move it back to where it was. If we hit just the bracket, no command, that should bring it all the way to the right. Yeah, okay. So we did that. Let's hold command and do the left bracket one. So now it's in the same spot, only on the right side. Now if we go over to our instance, we have this variant property and we can say we want to have the position on the right. You'll notice all of these properties stay the same because they are part of that variant. Now, I'm going to try an experiment here. I have a theory that I think I've done this before in my professional life, but I can't remember. So we're just going to try it out. I'm going to make a property, and I think I can apply it only to this variant. So let's double click on one of these small boxes in the second variant. And let's go down to the appearance. And we're going to click apply variable property here. And we're going to click plus. And it's going to be a Boolean. And we're going to do show small boxes. And we'll keep that defaulted to true. Click create. Now I want to click on the other boxes. So we'll click on one, we'll hold down command or shift and select the other remaining three and go to appearance, click apply variable property. And this time we don't need to create a new one. We already have one. We're going to click show small boxes. Okay, so now let's see that behavior. If I am right, the first variant will not show that property because it doesn't apply to any of these. We did not apply it to these small boxes, but the second one should. So we click on the first one. Yeah, we don't see that toggle. Let's click on the second one. We do see that toggle. So if we check this, there, all of the small boxes are now hidden in this variant. Now, odds are we want this one to mimic that. So what we could do is come up here, double click, and shift and get all four of those small boxes. Come over to appearance, apply property, show small boxes. And now we have that on both variant options here. Check that. Boom. Well, this also gave me an opportunity to show something else. When I check that, it does hide all the boxes. However, our big box is on the left, which is fine. But on this one, it's also on the left, but yet our variant is called big box position right. So it would make sense. You would anticipate if you were coming into this file and using this component, and you didn't make this component, you would anticipate that that big box would set to the right, whether or not there are small boxes. So we can address that here. Let's double click and get the variant here, and we've got everything aligned top left on the second variant. We don't want that. Let's go top right. So boom, we addressed that now. It didn't affect anything in the full version with all the boxes because they're still filling all the space and whatever. But when those boxes are not there, we want to make sure that the big box gets shifted over to the right. So cool. Okay, so before we get into something a little more fun, I want to point out one other thing with variants. So Figma's pretty loose about what you do with a variant. More often than not, a variant you would want it to be relevant, some sort of different version of this same concept. You don't have to, but better practice. If you're going to create something that's completely different than this, you might as well make another component. But to demonstrate, if we want to create another variant, now that we have more than one, when we select a variant, you have this plus sign here, and that will create a new variant based off of whichever one you have selected. So with the second one selected, let's go ahead and hit plus. But let's go ahead and do something that just kind of doesn't make sense. In fact, we'll give this variant the name that. That is now doesn't make sense. Let's start by, let's select all of the boxes and hit delete. And let's see, with the remaining frame, let's change the width and the height to just 100 by 100. And let's add a corner radius, 100. So now we just have a circle. We have run out of room here. So let's go ahead. Let's click on the components frame and click on this dotted line, which I forgot to explain, so I will here in a second. And let's make this, click on the height and do fill. That didn't work the way I expected. Let's just go ahead and make this bigger. There we go. I'll explain what happened there some other time. A little bit of a quirk with the auto layout. But okay, so we now have this circle here. Let's even make it weirder by, I'll make it black. And so it's just this big black circle. Doesn't make sense with our components, but it does exist now. So if we click on one of the instances, scroll up here, we now have doesn't make sense as a variant, and we have this circle. We do have this set to fill. So that is why it's stretching it out and it's not a circle, because it's really just a box with rounded corners. So if we set this to fixed and drag it, there, now it's a circle. But this is actually going to probably screw up if we go back to using right. No, it doesn't. Okay, so that's good to know. But so again, this is possible, but not really the best use of a variant. If you wanted some different types of circles to be available, then you'd make a circle component with some different variants. But now that we're in here, let's explain this purple dotted line. This is Figma's way of telling you that this is a component set, which is basically a set of variants. And just so it looks better, let's got the width set to a fixed amount. Let's hug. Took our padding back, but it bumped us into our other frame. There we go. So now you can see that box a little bit better. So anything in here is within this box or component set is a variant of that component. And you can see that reflected here. So the component set is the multiple diamonds. A variant of the master is a filled diamond, and an instance of a variant of a component is a hollow diamond. Something else to point out, when we first started this, if we wanted to add a property the way we did it the first time, you no longer can select just the first one here. You want to select the component set, and that's how you would add a property, which you can see here. I'm really itching to do a real world example, but I have one other thing I want to go over with this generic thing here. Let's go ahead and we'll click on this instance and switch it back to right. And let's go ahead and get rid of this variant that doesn't make sense. So delete that. Let's click on this component set and change the height to fixed, and we'll just drag this to be smaller. Let's click on the component, and for the auto layout, let's make it top center, and this is just some cleanup. I want to create another component to actually use this big box for that example. So double click on either one of these big boxes, Control or Command C, and let's paste it in our components frame. You'll see it filled the space. We don't want that. Let's do hug. Actually, let's double click on this, 3275. So we'll make that 3275. Again, these are some of the quirks with the auto layout that I've just learned to adapt to, but I can't necessarily tell you why. some of these little quirks are happening. But moving on, we're going to turn this into a component. So with this big box selected, let's click over here on the create component. And we no longer have any of the properties that were assigned in here. So let's double click on the big box text and click on apply variable. We'll just create a new one and we'll name it the same thing. Or actually, because it's within the big box, we can actually we'll just keep it text. We don't need to give it the kind of prefix of big box like we did in the other component. So create property. All right, so now we go over to our assets. We now see we have two components. We have big box and row of boxes. What I want to do is recreate this concept. I want to adjust how we're doing things here to demonstrate how you can include components within components and do some pretty cool stuff with that concept. So we'll keep this, we'll keep the current big box there, but let's click on this. Sorry, I meant to click and drag. So click and drag. We're going to drag it in here. So this is our instance of a component within a component. And this is the one that is just part of the component. What we want to do is first, we're going to apply that appearance property to show and hide, just like this one has. So we'll click on that apply variable property and choose show big box. So now that is bound. So actually, while we're here, let's click on this instance that has both of them. And let's do show big box. That's going to hide both of them because right now it's applied to both. And at the moment, you can see the big box label. If I change that, it only affected this one because that's not how we control the text in this one. So that's important to know. What I want to do is I'm going to remove the original big box, now leaving the one that is an instance. And let's go ahead, we'll double click, copy this, and click on our second variant and paste it. And we'll go ahead, yes, it still has the property assigned to it, so that's good. Let's go ahead and delete the original one. Let's double click on the big box again, command bracket left. All right, now it's in the position it should be in. But again, when we click on these now, we don't have the ability to edit that text. But if we click on the component set here, and we go to the properties, we go to add, you'll now see expose properties from. So we can say nested instances, and we want to use the big box. You will not see those properties listed here. You'll just see that they're available. But if you click on one of the instances, now we have the ability to edit that label again. You can see it falls under the umbrella of the big box component. Now, it's getting a little deep, but let's go ahead and create a variant of big box. So with big box selected, click variant, and we will call it shade. And variant 2 will be light. And the first one will be dark. So we don't have any difference here yet. So let's click on this second one, which is the light one. Scroll down, and actually I want to point out another neat feature of Figma. Really time-saving, life-changing, honestly. I was going to go in here and change the fill and then I'm going to make it light. So that means then the text probably isn't going to be seen. So I'd have to change the color of the text. However, whenever you have an item selected that has any color of property at all, whether it's on the item itself or any of the items that are within it, you can see a list of all the colors being used and manipulate them. Not only manipulate them, but this button here, I'm not going to use it at the moment because it's going to change my selection, but you could actually click this and every single item that color refers to within that frame will then be highlighted, selected. And that could be really powerful. But for now, let's say I want to change this to a light color. And the font, I want to be dark. Or I could click over to libraries and hit body text. So it would be dark. Okay, so now if we click on our instance, scroll up to the properties, now you see we have our variant. So I can do light. There you can barely see it, at least I can barely see it on my monitor because the contrast between the light color and the background of the box is not much. So let's go ahead, click on that variant again, scroll down, change the fill to something a little more visible. There we go. So now we have a light and dark version of our big box that is available within the row of boxes component. And right now I'm kicking myself for my naming convention here. It's terrible. I will stick to one eventually. But again, it is up to you. There are some drawbacks to doing things one way or the other, but good to see that you have that flexibility. One of the things I mentioned when we first got into this was that when you do have properties available on a component, when you click on it here, you now see those available here. Okay, let's get into something a little more real world. And we will go ahead. Well, actually, I can take this chance to demonstrate something else. So I want to get rid of this component. It's not necessary. And we're going to convert this big box component into a button component because it kind of looks like a button, and let's go ahead and not spend time recreating the same thing. I want to have something slightly real life to put these buttons in. So let's go ahead and take advantage of these shapes here, which could potentially be a header and a footer of maybe a website, a weirdly shaped one. But one way we can do that is if we right click on this instance, we can come down here and detach it. So what that does is we now have all the pieces of that component in the state it was in at the time, but is no longer bound. In fact, if we click on file, you'll see this is no longer purple. So it's not bound to this component anymore. But you do see we did not detach big box. That still is an instance of the component. So that's exactly what we wanted. Let's go ahead and do that again down here. Right click, detach instance. And while we have that one selected, let's go over here and rename it to footer. And we'll select this one, rename it to header. Okay, I'm going to collapse that for the moment. Let's go ahead, and we no longer have any instances in here, so let's go ahead and just delete that component. So now we just have this one, the big box. But I don't want it to be big box anymore. I want it to be button. So we come down here, we got the master, and let's just call that button. And you'll see that the instance of it here, that's why I collapsed that, so you could just see this one. That is now called button because this is an instance of the button component. let's go, let's see. We've got the component set selected. Let's adjust the property here of the text property, and we'll call this label. And for now, we'll do button label as the default text. So again, when I talked about how we can override certain things, that adjusted here, but this one has some overrides in it. But let's go ahead and right click. Let's reset the instance, which I don't think I explained that. This is another thing you can do. If I want to undo all of the overrides, I want to caution you when you use this, but it's definitely helpful. This will just put it completely back, but that's going to include the text and everything. So just be mindful that it will literally reset it to basically the first, I think even the first variant. I don't know if it will stay as light or not. So let's do it. No, it did. Okay, so it kept the variant, but it put all the properties back. Let's go over here. Let's make this a little bigger. Okay. Let's drag this frame over. And this is why I mentioned in the first video that these Figma pages can become kind of the Wild West. Like if we zoom out, right now it's pretty sane, but just depending on how you do things, you can get a little crazy with this. So, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate the header. So Command D, and I'm gonna rename that to content area. And we'll go ahead and double click in there, get rid of the button, and let's set this height to fill. Okay, so it's starting to look like a header and content area. Let's go ahead and get rid of the actual color. It's just an empty container. And then on our component preview, let's rename this to website. Site, maybe dash home page. And let's make this shape a little more like, the size of a browser on a desktop or something. Let's click on the footer and make sure the width is set to fill. And click back on the parent frame. Let's change the padding on the right and left to actually be 0. So everything's flush, and same with the top and bottom. And then in the content area, we've already got padding, so that's good. Well, actually, I don't want any buttons in the footer. So let's use this button that we already have. We'll double click on that, drag it into the header. Okay. So this is kind of ugly, but just think of this as the kind of main navigation of the website. And in fact, let's go ahead and make this a little more buttony looking. And we'll select both variants, scroll down. Let's add, we'll try 10. A little over the top, but we'll roll with it. Okay. So what I want to do is, instead of this being a light and dark button, if we were actually doing like a light and dark mode, I would handle that completely different. So I don't actually want to do that. What I want to do, click on the parent, and instead of shade, let's edit that, and we'll call it state. So if you're a programmer or a developer, state will definitely makes sense to you, or should. But state is going to be the state of the button, which if we double click on this one, let's call this default. Spell it right. And select the second one and call this hover. So this is a little more of a real world example of how to use a variant, or how you might. So the idea here, let's go ahead and duplicate this a couple of times. Ignore this AI thing. We'll get into that later. And let's go ahead and give this relevant. Let's say home. Put a label for that one. Click on this one. Services. About us. Contact. This is a really ugly layout. It's driving me nuts. But so now this makes a little more sense. I want to actually, let's see. I want to adjust how this looks though, or the coloring. So default, I want no background. So we will remove the fill. And our text now doesn't make sense. So we'll click on the libraries, we'll do body text. Okay. So what we're showing here now is, or indicating, is that this is the home page with home in the hover state. If we wanted to, we could also, let's go ahead and create another state. I'm going to want it to have no background, so we'll just use this one to create the variant. This one, scroll up, this state will be active. So this is a more relevant way to demonstrate this. And for the moment, we will just double click on the text. And let's change the font weight to black. Okay. So let's, on our instance here for home, instead of hover, let's change it to active. So that kind of indicates we're on the home page. So ugly, but more real world example of a component. And we'll go ahead and do the concept of a nested component again. This will be kind of a generic way to represent it, but let's make a square shape. And let's right click on that. This is another way to create a component versus the button over on the right. If you right click and hit create component, let's find that over here. I will note I have the interface zoomed in incredibly large just for the sake of the video. Normally I would have a lot more real estate and I wouldn't have to scroll like this, and hopefully you're not either. But let's change this to icon. So we're not going to get super fancy with our icons, but let's, with this selected, we're going to click create variant. So now we have two icons. This one, actually, I don't know if I can do this or not. Well, let's around the corners. Yeah, I can't because this is a shape. This is why often I don't use shapes, and I don't know why I did for this example. I'm going to show you a trick here. I don't want to undo this. I mean, I could, I probably would, but just to give you an opportunity to learn something else, I want to replace this with a frame. So one way I could do that is delete it, add a frame, yada, yada, yada. That takes too much time in my brain. We can do what's called create frame from selection, which if you right click, I thought it was in here, but it's not. No. Oh, okay. That's why I couldn't. So I had the actual variant container selected. I want the actual rectangle shape selected. There we go. This is what I wanted. Frame selection. So all this is going to do is just embed this into a frame. I can't remember if I showed this in the last video or not, so I wanted to point it out. So we'll frame that selection. So now the shape is inside of a frame. I'm just going to delete the shape. I still have the frame now though. And let's give it a fill. And for now, I'll just do like a dark red. And I want to round the corners. So it's 22 by 20. We'll just make it 20. So it's a circle. So basically, this is going to be end up being our circle icon and our square icon here. I'm going to go ahead and delete this variant and double click on the other one. Click add. Let's go ahead and auto layout this component set. Shift A. There you go. While we're here, point something out. You see how we're getting yelled at over here? This is saying that our variants are not variants. They are exactly the same, which is not good. Can cause things to not function right. So before we even change the properties, or to make this into a square, let's just go ahead and change this property to name. And we'll change the variant to square. And this should resolve that there. Now let's click on the second one. It's hard to see down here. There we go. Change this to circle. And pop back up here. And let's actually make it a square by double clicking. Select the frame and do 0 or radius. Let's select the component set and there's no gap. Let's put a 20 pixel gap. Nope. Let's do 10. And there you go. We have our icons. Again, not very exciting, but we go to assets. We now have button and icon. And if we want to, we can take this icon and put it in here. So now we have a nested instance. We're not exposing those properties yet, but we will. But now we need to copy this and add it to the other variants. So this is a good time to point out, like, as you get more comfortable in Figma, you're going to find areas where you can improve your efficiency. For instance, if I was doing this for a real project, I would build out the first variant as full as I can imagine ahead of time, so that I don't need to do this copying and pasting and manually. I can set this one up and then make the variants so that I've got all the pieces and parts. But since I'm doing this kind of on the fly and haven't thought it through, this is what we end up with. So copy this, paste it, command bracket left, do paste, and bracket left. Let's go ahead and make this a little bigger, and we're colliding. Okay, so now we have the icon component. Let's first address the visibility of the icon, because maybe we don't want icons in our button, but we want the option to have one. So with that selected, let's go to appearance and click apply, but we don't have any, so we'll hit plus. And it was smart enough to label it this way, so that's exactly what we want. Let's do create property, and now we'll double click, and we can just apply that property to the other ones. Okay, now over here, we now have show icon. Okay. Now with the component set selected, let's nest those properties. So we can do create property, nested instances, icon. Let's scroll out so we can see our web page. Okay, let's select one of these. And now you see we have the icon name option. So maybe we want that one to be a circle. And maybe this one a circle as well. And maybe this one, we don't want an icon. So now you can see a more real world example of how you might compose not only a component, but a more advanced component. I think there's a name for it. I can't think of it, but basically components that have components within it. And I encourage you to find ways to do this, but also sometimes it doesn't make sense to nest something. Sometimes it does, and you'll learn as you go. If this was real world, I would flesh this out way more. We'd probably have more variants. So let me, before we wrap this video up, let's show you how, like, I'm going to stumble over the terms here so it doesn't get confusing. So we have 3 variants in this component and 1 variant property, which is state. We can create more variant properties to distinguish between variants. So the combination of variant properties is a totally different variant. And that probably doesn't sound like it makes sense at the moment, but we'll make it make sense. So with the component set selected, let's do properties. And we're going to create a variant property. And we're going to call this type or style. And default will be the first style. But let's go ahead. I think we can do this if we select all of these and hit plus. Perfect. So now we have 6 variants here, but again, we're getting yelled at because they've got, they don't have a unique combination of properties. So we'll have to address that. Okay, and just for my sanity, let's make these be in the same order. So command bracket left. No, that doesn't work because this isn't actually an auto layout. Let's make this an auto layout. Now select this one, command bracket, oh, there we go. So now they're in order. So what we're going to do is, this is the default style, but we're going to make an outline version. So let's select each of these variants and we'll change the style. We'll create a new style variant called outline. There, and that resolved the issue of the conflicting variants. Now let's double click in. Look at the file here. Let's see. Okay, so let's add a border. Let's select each of these and we'll add a stroke. And I'll just make it like a dark red. Okay. So now this is the outline version of the button. So now when we come over here and scroll up with the instance selected, now we have 2 different variant options. We want the state to be default, but maybe we want the style to be an outline style button. Ugly implementation or example, but example nonetheless. This would be helpful, like maybe on the header you want these plain text buttons, but within the content of the website, maybe you want to use these outline buttons or something. That would be a more realistic use of these. But I wanted to show you how you can have multiple variant properties to create your variants. Felt like a mouthful. We could go crazy with components. At the moment, though, we're going to go ahead and we're going to end here for now. And I think later on we'll make some more complex variants, and we'll start making a even more realistic design. I think in the last video I mentioned we were going to do like a to-do app, so we'll do that. But next, after this video, the next one, we'll talk we'll kind of do like a basic run through of prototyping, which is super cool.